After my father's funeral, my stepmother gave me 30 days to move out, so I gave her 24 hours. Becky was cooked. All right, Reddit, strap in because this story is absolutely wild. This happened about 8 months ago. My dad remarried this woman when I was 14, and let me tell you, she was like a walking catalog of red flags wrapped in a fake smile and a PhD in manipulation. Picture Disney evil stepmom but Walmart edition. Yes, because this chick thought she'd outsmart everyone. Let me tell you how Becky turned my father's house into her castle. And I was the unwanted Cinderella. Never mind, I'm a dude. She'd been plotting to banish since day one. I, 17 male, will paint you a picture of this woman first. Sandra was 34 when she married my 42-year-old dad, perfectly blonde, in that I spend more on hair maintenance than most people make in a month way. She drove a white BMW that she somehow convinced dad to co-sign for, and had this habit of name-dropping her connections in the real estate business. Picture this. Sandra was absolutely perfect when dad was around. Sweet voice, helpful wife, always asking about my day with this sickeningly fake maternal tone. How was football practice, sweetie? She'd coo while dad beamed proudly at his new wife taking interest in his son. But the second dad left for work, this woman turned into a discount store villain faster than you could say evil stepmother. Her favorite trick was the accidental food sabotage. I'd come home from football practice, starving like only a growing teenage athlete can be, and grab my leftover pizza from the fridge. Sandra would waltz into the kitchen and accidentally knock my plate right off the counter. We're talking a full Olympic-style arm swing that would make Tom Brady jealous. The first time it happened, I called her out immediately. Sandra, what the hell? That was my food. She did this whole innocent act like, oh my goodness, I didn't even see you there, while I'm literally standing right in front of her. Impossible to miss unless you're legally blind. I'm 6 feet 2 inches and was wearing my bright red practice jersey. Not exactly camouflaged. Bullshit, I shot back. You looked right at me before you knocked it over. But here's where Sandra showed her true genius. She started crying. Not fake crying, but these perfect little tears that made her mascara run just enough to look genuine. When Dad got home, she had this whole story ready about how I'd been aggressive and hostile over a simple accident. Dad pulled me aside. Alan, I know this adjustment is hard, but Sandra's trying her best. You need to give her a chance. I tried explaining what really happened, but Sandra had already poisoned the well. He's been having such a difficult time accepting me, she told Dad, with this sad little voice that made me want to puke. I understand his pain, but the hostility is getting concerning. Sandra had this whole psychological playbook down to a science. She'd wait until I was particularly stressed, like right before a big game or when I had a major test, then pull some shit that would set me off. Then she'd act like my anger was proof of deeper issues. The next time she pulled the food sabotage trick, I was ready. Set up my phone to record the whole kitchen before getting my leftovers. Sure enough, Sandra came in and accidentally knocked my plate off the counter again. Got you on video this time, I said, showing her the phone. Sandra's face went white for about 2 seconds. Then she smiled. Oh, honey, you're recording me now? That's concerning behavior. When Dad got home, guess what Sandra's story was? That I was secretly recording her and making her feel unsafe in her own home. She spun it like I was some kind of stalker preparing for a true crime podcast, and Dad bought every word. Delete that video, Alan, Dad ordered. This paranoid behavior stops now. That's when I realized I was dealing with someone way smarter than I'd given her credit for. Sandra wasn't just mean. She was strategically destroying my credibility one incident at a time. But the real psycho move was when she started dumping her coffee grounds and banana peels straight into my bedroom trash can. Not the kitchen trash, my bedroom trash. When I called her out, she'd hit me with, "Oh, sweetie, I was just trying to help with chores." Yeah, helping my room smell like the dumpster behind a gas station, where the rats have given up hope. I started emptying my trash every single day just to avoid the smell. Sandra noticed and made sure to comment to Dad about how responsible I was becoming with my chores. She was literally getting credit for cleaning up the mess she was creating. But wait until you hear about the shampoo incident. I'm getting ready for school one morning, hop in the shower and start washing my hair. Except it's not shampoo. It's actual super glue. This psycho had replaced my Head and Shoulders with construction adhesive. The bottle looked exactly the same from the outside. She'd somehow transferred the labels. I came downstairs absolutely furious. Sandra, you crazy bitch! You put super glue in my shampoo! Hey! Language, kid! Dad snapped, but I was beyond caring. Look at my hair! She's trying to make me go bald. Sandra was already in full victim mode, tears streaming down her face. Robert, I would never do such a thing. How could he accuse me of something so horrible? Maybe you mixed up the bottles by accident, Dad suggested weakly. Accidentally put superglue in a shampoo bottle? I yelled. Are you serious right now? But Sandra had her story locked and loaded. I think Alan did this to himself for attention. The adjustment has been so hard on him, and teenagers sometimes hurt themselves when they're crying out for help. Dad actually bought it. He made me see a therapist because he thought I was self-harming for attention. I spent 6 months in counseling trying to convince Dr. Phil that I wasn't mentally ill, while Sandra played the concerned stepmother at every family session. During those therapy sessions, Sandra would sit there dabbing her eyes with tissues, talking about how challenging it was to love a child who resented her presence. Dr. Phil ate it up, constantly praising Sandra for her patience and dedication to our blended family. Thank God for my Uncle Joe, though. Dad's younger brother, built like a linebacker and with zero filter. Joe was 5 years younger than Dad, but looked like he could bench press a Honda Civic. He'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan and had that military bullshit detector that could spot a liar from 3 counties away. Joe saw right through Sandra's act from day one. The first time he met her, she tried her sweet stepmother routine on him, and he just looked at her and said, "Lady, you've got more fake parts than a junkyard Camaro." Sandra hated Uncle Joe with the fire of 1,000 suns, but she couldn't manipulate him like she could Dad. Joe would come over for Sunday dinner and call her out on everything. He had this way of asking innocent questions that exposed her lies. Like when Sandra told Dad I'd been disrespectful about her cooking, Uncle Joe would ask for specifics. What exactly did he say, Sandra? Well, he said my meatloaf was dry. And the meatloaf was dry. Kids got taste buds. Maybe try adding some flavor next time. I learned to save my real complaints for when Uncle Joe was around because he'd back me up. Uncle Joe, Sandra's been dumping coffee grounds in my bedroom trash again? That's weird as hell, Sandra. Why would you do that? Sandra would scramble for explanations, but Uncle Joe never bought her innocent act. He'd just stare at her with this look that said, I've seen better liars in Iraqi prisons. Our neighbor Mrs. Wang saw through Sandra's manipulation too. Mrs. Wang was this tiny Chinese woman who'd lived on our street for 30 years and had zero patience for bullshit. She'd raised 4 kids as a single mom and could spot a faker from space. One day she caught me taking out the trash and said, "That woman's playing games with your father's head, kid. Good thing you got your uncle watching out for you." Mrs. Wang had this habit of accidentally being in her front yard whenever Sandra was outside, just watching. Sandra hated being observed when she couldn't control the narrative. I'd see her peek through the curtains to check if Mrs. Wang was around before stepping outside. The thing that really got me fired up, though, when she started throwing away Mom's stuff, I came home to find her putting Mom's jewelry in a garbage bag, and I completely lost it. "Get your hands off my mother's things!" I screamed, grabbing the bag away from her. "Alan, your father asked me to clean out these old things," she said smoothly. "It's not healthy to keep dwelling on the past. Dad would never throw away Mom's jewelry." When Dad got home, Sandra had already spun the story. I was organizing the spare room, and Alan became violent when I tried to move some old boxes. He's been hoarding his mother's belongings in an unhealthy way. Dad believed her, but I'd already hidden most of Mom's important stuff. Uncle Joe helped me move the keepsake box to his house that weekend. We did it like a military operation. Joe created a distraction by asking Sandra detailed questions about her real estate career while I smuggled the box out the back door. "She's not just trying to control the present," Uncle Joe said, loading the box into his truck. "She's trying to erase the past. Your mom, me, anyone who knew your dad before her. I kept fighting Sandra's bullshit for 2 years, calling her out every chance I got. But she was always 3 steps ahead, turning every confrontation into evidence of my adjustment issues or anger problems. Dad got so wrapped around her finger that he started seeing my legitimate complaints as teenage rebellion. The genius part of Sandra's game was that she never left evidence. Every manipulation was perfectly designed to make me look crazy when I tried to explain it. Uncle Joe was the only one who believed me. "Your dad's smart, but he's got a blind spot for women who know how to play the victim," Uncle Joe told me. "She's professional level crazy." By the time I turned 16, I'd figured out Sandra's playbook pretty well. The problem was that Dad was completely under her spell. She'd spent 2 years carefully building this image of herself as the perfect wife dealing with a difficult stepson, and Dad bought every lie. Sandra had this way of timing her manipulations with Dad's work stress. When Dad had a particularly rough week at the accounting firm, She'd manufacture some crisis with me that required his immediate attention. Suddenly, Dad's dealing with his problem child instead of focusing on whatever was bothering him at work. The woman was like a psychological vampire, feeding off the drama she created. She'd start arguments between Dad and me, then position herself as the peacemaker, trying to hold the family together. It was sick how good she was at it. When she started sabotaging my college plans, I didn't stay quiet about it. Northwestern had been my dream school since I was a kid, mainly because their engineering program was legendary. I'd busted my ass maintaining a 3.8 GPA while playing varsity football, and that partial scholarship was the result of 4 years of grinding. Sandra's trying to screw me out of Northwestern, I told Dad directly after one of her family financial meetings. Alan, that's enough, Dad said. Sandra's looking out for our family's financial stability. She's looking out for herself. Uncle Joe offered to pay the gap, and you're listening to her instead of your own brother? That set Sandra off on one of her victim performances. I've tried so hard to be a good stepmother, but Alan resents me for not being his biological mother. I understand his pain, but I can't keep being the target of his hostility. Dad fell for it completely. Son, Sandra's been nothing but supportive. Your anger toward her is getting out of hand. I tried a different approach. Started documenting everything Sandra did, keeping a journal with dates and times. When she'd dump coffee grounds in my trash, I'd take photos. When she'd accidentally break my stuff, I'd write it down. I even started timing her accidents. They always happened within an hour of Dad leaving the house. She never pulled her major manipulations on weekends, when Uncle Joe might drop by unexpectedly. She avoided doing anything when Mrs. Wang was obviously watching from her yard. And she always made sure to have witnesses for my angry reactions, but never for her provocations. The day I showed Dad my evidence, Sandra was ready with her counterattack. Robert, I'm very concerned about Alan's obsessive behavior toward me, she said, flipping through my documented proof like it was a stalker's manifesto. This level of surveillance and paranoia isn't normal for a teenager. Dad looked at my carefully organized evidence like I was building a case to murder Sandra in her sleep. This is extremely disturbing, Alan. You're documenting your stepmother like she's a criminal. Because she is acting like a criminal. But Sandra had the perfect response ready. I think Alan needs professional help. This obsessive documentation of my daily activities feels very threatening. Dad made me delete everything and banned me from harassing Sandra. Meanwhile, she got to play the traumatized victim who was bravely staying in a home where her stepson was showing concerning stalker-like behavior. That's when she really escalated things. She started going through my room when I wasn't home, claiming she was doing laundry. I'd come back to find my stuff slightly moved, my computer history checked, my phone charging cable mysteriously relocated. Nothing major enough to prove, but enough to make me feel like I was losing my mind. I set up a hidden camera in my room, using an old iPhone, thinking I'd finally catch her in the act. But Sandra was too smart for that. She must have spotted the camera because nothing happened for 2 weeks. Then she told Dad she was concerned about privacy violations because she'd seen me setting up recording equipment. Dad searched my room and found the hidden phone. Instead of asking why I felt the need to protect my privacy, he grounded me for a month for violating the family's trust. The worst part was watching Dad change. Uncle Joe would point it out every time he visited, which was becoming less and less frequent thanks to Sandra's interference. Your brother's not the same guy, Alan, he'd tell me privately. She's got him isolated from his friends, making all his decisions, controlling who he talks to. It's textbook manipulation. Uncle Joe was right. Dad used to have poker nights with his college buddies every month. Sandra convinced him those guys were bad influences because they'd make jokes about marriage and complain about their wives. Dad used to golf every Saturday morning with his work friends. Sandra started scheduling family activities every weekend that mysteriously required Dad's presence but somehow never included me. I tried warning him directly. Sandra's controlling you, Dad. You never make decisions without asking her anymore. He got defensive immediately. Sandra and I are partners. That's what marriage looks like. No, it's what manipulation looks like. Uncle Joe sees it, Mrs. Wang sees it, everyone sees it except you. Sandra overheard that conversation and used it to drive another wedge between Dad and Uncle Joe. Robert, your brother is filling Alan's head with these conspiracy theories about me. It's creating a very toxic environment. Dad started limiting Uncle Joe's visits after that. Sandra had successfully turned my attempts to fight back into proof that Uncle Joe was a bad influence, and I was becoming increasingly hostile and paranoid. The isolation got so bad that Dad stopped talking to most of his old friends entirely. Sandra would answer the phone when they called and say Dad was busy with family responsibilities. She convinced him that his friends didn't understand the challenges of blended families and were undermining our healing process. When Dad got his cancer diagnosis, I knew Sandra was going to use it to lock down her control completely. I tried warning him one more time. Dad, Sandra's going to isolate you from everyone who cares about you. Don't let her cut you off from Uncle Joe when you need family most. Dad was too tired to fight. Alan, Sandra's going to be taking care of me. I need you to support her, not constantly attack her. Sandra had spent 3 years positioning herself as the long-suffering victim of my anger issues. When Dad got sick, she finally had the excuse to cut me and Uncle Joe out completely while playing the devoted wife protecting her husband from toxic family drama. I'd fought her manipulation for years, but she'd been playing a longer game than I realized. By the time Dad was too sick to think clearly, Sandra had already won his complete trust and loyalty. Uncle Joe was the only one who understood what had really happened. You fought the good fight, kid, he told me. But she's been working on your dad since day one. Professional manipulators always win in the short term. So what do we do now? Uncle Joe smiled grimly. Now we wait for her to get overconfident and make a mistake. People like Sandra always do. When Dad had to move to Sunset Manor Hospice, Sandra really showed her true colors. She got herself appointed as his primary caregiver and medical advocate, which basically made her the gatekeeper to my dying father. And the first thing she did was ban Uncle Joe from visiting. I wasn't going to take that lying down. You can't keep Uncle Joe away from his own brother, I told Sandra at the hospital. Your father needs peace and rest, she replied, checking her Apple Watch like she had somewhere more important to be. Dr. Peterson says family drama is the last thing he needs right now. Family drama? He's Dad's brother. A brother who's spent 3 years filling your head with conspiracy theories about me? Sandra shot back. Robert doesn't need that negativity during his final days. Dr. Peterson was this young resident who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Sandra had him completely snowed with her devoted wife act. She'd sit in those family meetings talking about Dad's treatment goals and quality of life decisions, like she actually gave a shit about anything besides controlling the narrative. I tried going to the hospital administration, but she had already spun her story. She told them Uncle Joe was emotionally unstable and had a history of aggressive behavior toward medical staff. Complete lies, but she had paperwork to back it up. Incident reports she'd filed claiming Uncle Joe had threatened her during previous visits. The head nurse, this battle axe named Margaret, who looked like she'd seen every scam in the book, actually apologized to me. I'm sorry, honey, but we have to take these reports seriously. Hospital policy. When Uncle Joe tried to visit, security removed him before he could even get to Dad's room. I watched from the waiting area as 2 guards escorted this decorated Marine veteran out of the building like he was some kind of threat. She's got him locked down tighter than Fort Knox, Uncle Joe told me over the phone. I can't even get past the front desk without her permission. So I tried a different approach. Started recording my conversations with Sandra on my phone, trying to catch her in her lies. I figured if I could get her admitting to keeping Uncle Joe away for personal reasons, rather than Dad's health, I might have something to work with. Why are you really keeping Uncle Joe away? I asked during one of my visits. Alan, your uncle has been very disruptive to your father's healing process, she said, not knowing I was recording. Healing process? Dad's dying, Sandra. Uncle Joe just wants to say goodbye. Sometimes goodbye is more about the living than the dying, she replied with this cold smile that made my skin crawl. When I played that recording for the hospital social worker, Sandra had already covered her bases. She told them I was secretly recording family conversations and showing increasingly unstable behavior. The social worker looked at me like I was the problem. Young man, recording private conversations without consent is illegal in this state, she lectured me. Sandra just sat there looking victimized while I got banned from bringing recording devices into the hospital. She'd somehow turned my attempt to expose her lies into more evidence of my concerning behavior patterns. Meanwhile, she'd spend entire afternoons camped out in Dad's room, sometimes bringing her book club friends to chat loudly in the hallway about whatever romance novel they were reading that month. These were the same women who'd never spoken to Dad when he was healthy, but suddenly they were all so concerned about his condition. But when I got my measly 15 minutes every other day, she'd hover nearby, tapping her foot and checking her phone like I was wasting precious time. The worst part was walking in on her with a stack of legal documents spread across Dad's bedside table. Dad was drifting in and out of consciousness from the morphine, and she's got him signing paper after paper with his shaking hand. What the hell are those papers? I demanded. Estate planning documents, Sandra said without looking up. Adult conversations that don't concern children. I'm 17, not 7, and I know what you're up to. This is my inheritance you're stealing. Sandra looked at me with pure hatred for just a second before her mask slipped back into place. Your father is protecting his assets for his family's future. If you have concerns, you can discuss them with our lawyer. I tried calling that lawyer, some sleazeball named Mitchell Pearson, who specialized in elder care planning. His secretary wouldn't even let me talk to him without Sandra's permission. Apparently, I wasn't considered family for legal purposes. I tried staying overnight once, just sleeping in that uncomfortable visitor's chair to be near Dad. At 2 a.m., Sandra shows up with 2 security guards claiming I was disturbing other patients. I'd been sitting there silently, holding Dad's hand while he slept. You planned this, I accused her as they escorted me out. You waited until visiting hours were over so you could have me removed. Alan's becoming increasingly paranoid and aggressive, Sandra told the guards. I'm concerned about his mental state. Itas. That's when I remembered the manila envelope Dad had given me when I turned 17. It was sitting in my desk drawer, labeled Alan open only if necessary, in his careful handwriting. At the time, I'd thought it was just college information, or maybe some sentimental father-son letter. Sitting there in my room, cut off from Dad just like Uncle Joe, I realized this was exactly what Dad had meant by if necessary. The contents of that envelope were like finding a nuclear weapon in your sock drawer. Dad had been planning for Sandra's exact moves for 2 years, and he'd made sure Uncle Joe knew about it. I called Uncle Joe immediately after reading everything. About damn time, he said when I told him about the envelope. Your dad and I planned this 2 years ago. Soon as he started seeing Sandra's real personality behind the mask, we got everything locked down legally. You mean Dad knew what she was? Kid, your father was a lot smarter than Sandra gave him credit for. All those times you thought he was buying her bullshit, he was building a case. Every conversation, every lie, he was documenting it all. Turns out Dad had been secretly recording Sandra's conversations toward the end, just like I'd tried to do. Uncle Joe had suggested it, and Dad had been building evidence against her manipulation for months. He'd gotten one of those tiny digital recorders that looked like a pen and kept it in his shirt pocket. She thought she was playing him, Uncle Joe said, but your old man was playing 4D chess while she was stuck on checkers. The first document was a deed transfer showing that Dad had quietly moved the house into an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary. The paperwork was dated 6 months after Sandra and Dad got married. The second was Sandra's prenuptial agreement. She'd been so eager to marry Dad that she'd basically signed away any claim to his assets. According to Uncle Joe, Dad had insisted on the prenup after Sandra started pushing for a quick wedding. She'd been so confident in her ability to manipulate him later that she'd signed without even reading the fine print. But the real kicker was Dad's handwritten letter. Alan, if you're reading this, it means Sandra has finally shown her true colors, and I'm no longer here to protect you. I know you've been fighting her lies for long, and I'm sorry I couldn't always back you up publicly, but I was gathering evidence the whole time. Joe tried to warn me about her from the beginning, and he was right. These papers will give you the power to fight back. Make it count. I love you more than life itself. Dad. Reading that letter, I finally understood. Dad had been listening to my complaints about Sandra. He'd just been smart enough to not let her know he was onto her game. Every time I'd felt like he was choosing her over me, he'd actually been building the case that would eventually destroy her. Your dad played the long game, Uncle Joe explained. He let Sandra think she was winning while he built the perfect legal trap. Every time you called out her bullshit and she spun it against you, your dad was taking notes. Uncle Joe pulled out his own folder, thick with documents and recordings. We've got 2 years of evidence, kid. Bank statements showing her spending habits, recordings of her lying to your dad, witness statements from Mrs. Wang and half the neighborhood. Sandra thought she was playing chess, but your dad was playing Stratego with backup plans for every move. There were also medical records showing that Dad had been completely lucid when he created the trust. Dr. Williams, Dad's longtime physician, had documented multiple conversations where Dad expressed concerns about Sandra's motives and his desire to protect my inheritance. We spent the next few hours going over every document. Uncle Joe explained the legal strategy Dad had used, making Sandra feel secure in her position while removing her access to anything valuable. The house, Dad's life insurance, his retirement accounts, even his car. Everything was either in trust for me or had beneficiary designations that excluded Sandra. The next morning, Sandra walked into the kitchen with this smug expression, carrying a formal eviction notice. She'd probably been working on it for weeks, just waiting for Dad to die so she could kick me out. She was wearing this expensive black dress that probably cost more than most people make in a week, mourning clothes that looked more like a victory outfit. We need to have a little chat about your living situation, she announced, sliding the notice across the table. I'm giving you 30 days, which is more generous than I need to be. I looked at that eviction notice, then back at Sandra sitting there so confidently in what she thought was her house. After 3 years of fighting her manipulation and losing every battle, I was finally going to win the war. You're right, I said, grabbing the folder from the counter. Someone definitely does need to move out. The look on Sandra's face when I dropped that deed on the kitchen table was absolutely priceless. Her iPad with the Zillow listings slid right off the edge and clattered to the floor like her entire world crashing down. This is my house, I said calmly. It has been for 2 years. She grabbed the paper with both hands, reading it frantically. I watched her face go through about 5 different emotions in 10 seconds: confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally rage. Her perfectly applied makeup started running as the reality hit her. This can't be right, she whispered. I was his wife. I have rights. This is impossible. You have rights, I agreed, sliding the prenup across the table. You're entitled to one Honda Accord and whatever dignity you have left. Neither's worth much at this point. That's when she really lost it. She threw her coffee mug at the wall, started crying these ugly, manipulative sobs that sounded more like a wounded animal than actual grief. This is fraud. You manipulated a dying man. I'll take you to court. With what money? I asked. You just found out you're broke. Good luck with that lawsuit, said a voice from the doorway. Uncle Joe had been waiting outside, and he walked in like he owned the place. Which technically, I guess he kind of did now. Sandra's face went white. You can't be here. I have a restraining order. Restraining order was against visiting the hospital, Uncle Joe said, settling into a chair. This isn't a hospital anymore. This is Alan's house. I pulled out the doctor's letter confirming Dad's mental competency when he created the trust. Dad was sharp as ever when he signed these papers. Your manipulation worked on the surface, but he was playing you the whole time. Uncle Joe was grinning like a Marine who just outflanked the enemy. Rob always said you were dumber than a box of rocks, Sandra. Turns out he was right. Sandra tried one last manipulation, switching to her wounded victim voice. Alan, you know your father wouldn't want this. He loved me. He wouldn't want you to throw me out on the street. Dad loved justice more than he loved liars, I shot back. And he spent 2 years making sure you'd get exactly what you deserve. That's when I pulled out my phone and called Anderson Locksmith, right in front of her. Hi, this is Alan Miller at 847 Maple Street. I need all my locks changed today. Yes, it's an emergency situation. You can't do this to me, Sandra screamed. What would your father think? Dad thinks you're exactly what Uncle Joe said you were from day one, I replied. A parasite who finally got what was coming to her. Uncle Joe stood up. Sandra, you've got 2 hours to pack your crap and get out. After that, we're throwing your stuff on the lawn and changing the locks. I looked out the window and saw Mrs. Wang on her porch with a bowl of popcorn, watching the whole show like it was the entertainment event of the decade. She waved at Uncle Joe, who tipped his baseball cap back at her. Sandra packed up her designer luggage in a rage, screaming about lawyers and lawsuits. Uncle Joe just sat there smirking and occasionally commenting on her performance like he was judging an Olympic event. Oscar-worthy stuff right there, he said when she started the fake crying again. This isn't over, she yelled, loading her Honda Accord. Uncle Joe walked out to the driveway. Yeah, it is. And next time you want to scam a dying man, maybe don't pick one whose son fights back and whose brother spent 20 years in the Marines. We know how to spot enemies. As Sandra drove away, probably for the last time, Mrs. Wang called out from her porch. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. The first thing Uncle Joe and I did after Sandra left was frame that eviction notice. It's now hanging right above my gaming setup as a permanent reminder of the day we absolutely demolished my stepmother's 3-year manipulation campaign. Sandra did try to sue me, just like she threatened. Uncle Joe connected me with his lawyer, the same guy who'd helped Dad set up the trust. The lawyer took one look at Sandra's case and basically laughed her out of his office. Your father's legal work was bulletproof, he told me. This woman has no case and no money to fight it anyway. Turns out Sandra's threats were just as empty as her bank account. She'd blown through most of her savings trying to maintain her lifestyle during Dad's illness, and the prenup left her with essentially nothing to fund a legal challenge. She also tried to contest the restraining order against Uncle Joe, claiming he'd threatened her during the eviction. The judge took one look at the evidence, including security footage from Mrs. Wang's doorbell camera, and threw out her complaint. Uncle Joe helped me restore the house over the next few months. We put all of Mom's keepsakes back where they belonged, removed every trace of Sandra's tacky decorating choices, and installed a brand new security system. Those awful seafoam green curtains she'd picked out? Gone. The fake inspirational quotes she'd hung everywhere? Trashed. The family photos where she'd somehow photoshopped herself into pictures from before she even met Dad? Burned in the backyard fire pit. Your dad would be proud, Uncle Joe said, looking around the finished house. We saved his home and kicked out the parasite. Mrs. Wong filled us in on Sandra's downfall over the following months. She'd tried couch surfing with her friend Lena, but that fell apart when Lena got tired of her constant victim routine and drama. Last we heard, she was renting a studio apartment above a nail salon and working at a call center for some sketchy insurance company. Karma's got perfect aim. The best part was finding Dad's secret recordings of Sandra's conversations. They were comedy gold. Sandra talking to her friends about how easy it was to manipulate Dad, bragging about the money she was going to inherit, even discussing backup plans for when Dad died. Bro was collecting evidence while you were fighting the battles, Uncle Joe said, listening to the recordings. He knew exactly what she was up to, but he had to let her think she was winning until he could spring the trap. Sometimes Sandra still tries to contact me, usually through fake social media accounts or anonymous emails. She sent me a Facebook friend request from an account called Jenny Thompson, with a profile picture that was obviously some random stock photo. Uncle Joe taught me to screenshot everything and forward it to the lawyer. Document everything, he always says. Crazy people hate evidence. Uncle Joe's become more like a second father to me. Every Sunday he comes over for dinner, and we talk about Dad, about life, about plans for the future. He's teaching me to rebuild Dad's old Camaro that's been sitting in the garage, and we're making real progress on it. Your dad always wanted to restore this with you, he told me. Now we're going to finish what he started. The truth is, I'm proud of how I fought the manipulation for 3 years. Uncle Joe was right. People like Sandra always get overconfident and make mistakes eventually. Sandra thought she was smarter than everyone else, but she underestimated both me and Dad. I kept fighting her lies, and Dad was building the legal trap that would destroy her plans. Update: just got accepted to Northwestern again for next fall with a full scholarship. Uncle Joe's already planning the road trip to move me into the dorms. Miller men stick together, he says. Your dad's watching, and he's proud as hell. Never stop fighting liars, bros.